Good morning. Hello, everybody. This
Hello.
is Dr. June. I'm Dr. Isabel, and we're here with Dr. Ann. She is an integrative medicine doctor. She talks all over the world, and she does retreats in mind over medicine. Good morning, Dr. Ann. Can you
Good
please
morning.
tell us about your practice and what you do in your practice?
Good morning, June and Dr. June and Dr. Isabel, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Yes, so as you mentioned, I'm a Doctor of Integrative Medicine, Doctor of Humanitarian Service also, that I do a lot of projects into the developing countries also. Okay. I'm a pharmacist, also a microbiologist, and I inherit the entire yoga practice. So in my practice, I have literally, as we say, that I'm biting the first bullet to bring Ayurveda and yoga as actually the quantum medicine, changing the side of the conventional medicine, because we know both sides better. And as we are overusing so much of the pharmaceuticals that I know from being a pharmacist for 35 plus years, right? So again, a lot of learning, a lot of wisdom, and here I am that I've really integrated yoga and Ayurveda into my practice. So I have a clinic. It's a very personal and a private clinic in New York, in Long Island. And as Dr. Isabel mentioned, I am more of the educator than just like seeing the clients. So I do more of the educational seminars and bringing out the concept, the new concept, right? And do the retreats and the interactive talks in the clinics all over the world. Yeah. So
Thank you. That's
Thank you.
amazing. It's an honor to have you here.
Yes, thank you.
Today we want to
my
talk a
pleasure.
little. Oh, thank you. We want to talk a little bit about doshas, and can you please explain to people that don't know about what they are? Um, just give us an explanation of what doshas are, please.
Okay. So dosha is an Ayurvedic term that describes our inherent traits. Okay. More like the individual's characteristics or the tendencies, right? And it refers to such things like our body frame, the eye colors, the digestive capacities, emotional balances, as well as the disease tendencies, right? So we all have different balances of doshas, right? Like, for example, some of us are tall, some are short, some cannot bear a cold, some doesn't like a damp, right? Some of us can eat anything and everything and does not pick up the weight, while others are like watching the food, but they still pick up the weight, right? So these are different traits, right, that we inherit, right? And according to Ayurveda, there are three basic traits that every human who is born has it, and they are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So according to that, all our development happens. Yeah.
So when you just mentioned about three different types, for example, the Vata type, what type of a food the nutrition should be eating and what type of food should be avoiding?
Okay, so as we say that these are the inherent traits, right? And then the inherent traits depends on literally the primordial elements and the dominance of the primordial elements into that particular dosha type. So say we have Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, right? The dominance of a particular primordial element, which in Ayurveda, there are 5 elements, which goes space, air, fire, water, and earth. So in Vata type of people, the dominance of space and air is more. So if you think about the space and air, It is dry, light, right? Airy, right? So for those type of people to balance themselves, they should be eating more of the unctuous food, oils, fats, right? So today there is a trend that everything is about the salad and the raw and the diet and all that. So actually, for Vata type of people, because they have these primordial elements of the space and the air in them, things like dry and light, like the salads, dry nuts, potato chips, things like that will imbalance them. So they should be reducing on those kind of food and favoring more of soupy, warm. Oils are okay for them. Fats are okay for them because that helps them build and keep the balance. So in other words, the Vata type of people should be avoiding the potato chips, raw salads, anything that is light and dry, the cold drinks, things like that. And you should favor more about, which there is a controversy, like nobody wants to eat the fat, but actually the oils, fats, ghees, the unctuous foods and fruits like the avocados, things like that will be good for the Vata type of people, right?
Thank you.
Correct. Just healthy fats.
Healthy
Avocado.
fats,
Correct.
right, right.
So does it change according to the seasons what they need to eat and what they have to avoid, if depending on the season?
Yes, definitely. So according to Ayurveda, right, we are all micro, part of the macro, as we just spoke about the primordial elements, right? So we are actually the micro model of the macro, right? The universe. So in other words, the individual's relationship with the universe does matter when it comes to balancing these traits, which are the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, right? So in other words, all aspects of the Prakruti is the Sanskrit word, right? So all aspects of the Prakruti or the nature, including us as a human, are governed by the environment, right? And the same rules apply, right, with the seasons and the environment, right? So when we ignore this natural laws because we are a part of it, we become imbalanced. And that's what literally brings the dosha or the imbalance in, right? So for example, according to the season, right? So let's say winter time, or we are literally like, let's talk about this season right now, from the spring to the summer. Okay, so when we are going from the spring to the summer, spring has more of the developing, right? Everything blooms, everything, yeah. So it has more of the kapha feature into it. So it is dense with the earth and the water particle, right? So in the spring, what kind of food you will eat and what kind of food you will not eat, right? So in other words, the season right now, spring, is kapha. So if I eat kapha type of food, which is, say, for example, watermelon, right? So the watermelon has already arrived into the supermarket, now. Yeah. So there is a water, heaviness, earth in it, right? And there is a water, heaviness, earth into the season out there. So if I eat that, I will become more heavy, and that would imbalance it, right? So that is like a one little example, of, or in the summertime, it is dry. So the summertime is related to the Pitta, fire, dry, right? So in the dry weather, if you would eat more of the dry things, right? Like the raw and the salads, right? it would actually imbalance you, right? So you should be eating the moist. So that's why the watermelon is good in the summer, right? And not good into the spring or the fall or the winter, right? So your innate dosha, right? So this is a Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are literally, we call it, is the imbalance. Every environment or anything around you kind of creates those imbalances. Yes. So even if you are a Vata person and you should have the oily, unctuous fat, the healthy fat into your diet, right? But how is the weather or the season out there? So if it is the wet and oily season, like the winter, or the rainy season where there is a more of the moist and the earth quality, right? Then you need to listen to yourself. Even if you are a Vata and you need the healthy fat, you're not going to be able to digest it because the season out there is more of the fat and the kapha. Right? That's why the same kind of food, you can digest it at certain time and not digest the same kind of food at the other times. I'm sure all of us have that experience, right? Like, how come, that food agreed with me when I ate it a month ago, but then there are also many other factors like your emotions and everything's involved. And that also relates to the season too, right? Like the spring is a fresh, and the joyful, right? But that's why we call is what we call that winter nights, dark something. There is a color associated with it. Winter blues, right? Yeah. Yes. Yes. So yes. So even if your basic doshas would fluctuate according to the season also, right?
So that leads to the next question that I like to ask. So there's, for example, next one is the Pitta. So the Pitta in nature is a lot of fires and energies in the body. So
You got it.
yeah, so there's a drink, for example, coffee or like a spicy food. In general speaking, that's agitate some of the Pitta nature. But then according to the season, might be okay in a certain time of the year that might could be able to drink those people. And then what's the recommendation?
Absolutely right. So, for example, the Pitta by nature has the innate elements of the fire and water. Okay. So the fire stimulates, right? So that's why, like any spices and things like that, if they would eat it in the summertime, it would give the opposite. It would aggravate the Pitta. Right? But the same Pitta person can eat the spicy food into the winter time. The same Pitta person can have a nice warm hot coffee if they are skiing on the mountains and when there is a cold, right? So it is according to, again, the season and the prakriti, right? Yeah. So in other words, the Pitta type of people can have the spices in the wintertime, in the cold season, right? And also whenever, sometimes when their emotions are down,
Oh, that's very
because that
interesting.
weighs them, that puts them down, that have, right. So to your question, yes, it varies. So one should not just stick to, I am this kind, so I should follow this for the rest of my life, because every factor into the environment, not only the season, your emotional condition also matters into the food that you choose. Yeah. And so then you can use it. It's what we call is the feedback mechanism, right? So you can choose the food to balance your doshas too. Right?
Perfect. So when the Pitta people are emotionally down, they're sad or anxious or depressed, it's better to increase that type of foods, the spicy and coffee, more fiery foods.
So a lot depends again on, because there is a big factor called the mind here everywhere, and how that mind helps digest the food too. Yeah. So we know that we have in a science and the physiology, we know that we have a mind-gut relationship, right? And how the mind thinks, the gut digests, right? So it is not something that, okay, I am depressed. I say, for example, I'm a Pitta person. I'm depressed, and if I eat the spicy food, it's going to, freshen me up. Right? So now that mind-gut relationship, how the mind is giving the meaning to the feeling, would affect how that particular food or the diet or even the spice would do its work, right? So if that depression is just that I don't feel like to get up, then the spice is okay, right? The physiological, right? But if that depression is I'm angry, right? Because the Pitta nature tends to be angry. They are go-getter people, right? They are very swift into the actions, right? So if they get imbalanced, they build up anger, right? So if that imbalance is due to the anger, now the spice adding will add to it, right? So it's a very intricate balance. This is where a lot about literally learning about your own self, how your physiology is related to the mind, because that again is the air factor. All your thoughts are the air factor, right? So there is no, in other words, there is not really like everything set. There is a guideline.
Yes,
There is a guideline. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So when we're talking about more of Kapha body type, their tendency is to gain weight easily. Is there a specific diet that they should stick to avoid that?
Definitely, yes. So as we said that there is a guideline, right? Yeah. So we talked about the Vata type of people, should have the healthy fats, right? The Pitta type of people, should definitely avoid, stimulating kind of foods and spices, right? So now the Kapha type of people, because they do have a tendency to gain the weight, and why they have a tendency to gain the weight, because they carry water and earth particle. It already weighs it down. So those kind of people, if they add, it's the opposite to Vata people. So they need to have more of the dry foods, right? So in other words, they need to have more of the dry foods, okay? Like salads are okay for them, right? Um, uh, um, nuts, but into the lighter forms, right? So more basically, they should avoid like the sweet, oily, heavy, large quantities of the food, avoid the nuts, which has a lot of oils, but then of course, processed foods that everybody should avoid, right? But they need to favor the light, dry, warm. They can spice up their food because that will increase their metabolism, right? So that's how avoiding certain foods and favoring certain foods. And that also goes to this, the foods in Ayurveda also relates a lot to the taste and how the taste would stimulate. So the Kapha type of people are recommended to favor spices like the pungent, astringent, bitter type of food, which tastes that way and the spices are that way. And that would help them to keep their weight into the check.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. N. We're going to have a second part for this. We're going to be talking a little bit more about how each dosha relates to their profession and lifestyle. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome. My pleasure.